Hello, here's another little short video. I've just thought about this question because I was talking with my friend Nick. Hi Nick, about this subject, runtime environment. So we were talking about how he basically installed a package for a function that worked fine on Vercel, but then when Nick, you ported it to Cloudflare, it didn't work. And you were like, why? Why does this not work in Cloudflare, on Cloudflare functions? And yet it did on Vercel. Now, this happens because of the runtime environment, so where your code is running. And it's important to know these things because JavaScript works in different contexts. So before, JavaScript used to just run in the browser. Here, this one over here is global web, and that would only work in the browser. But now it works in Node.JS as well. So that's server-side language. So that happens on your computer that you're hosting somewhere, doesn't it? And then this gets sent to the user. So wherever the user is, that was where the JavaScript lives for there. And they work in slightly different ways in that you don't have access to the window object, so you can't do a window add event listener on Node because there's no window, it's a server. Similarly, on JavaScript, you don't have access to FS, which is the file system. So you can't write files to where are you going to write it to? It's a browser. If you understand it, it's important to know that certain contexts they're different, aren't they? You know, it makes sense, doesn't it, when you think about it this way, in that you don't have certain things in one context and you do in another. But Cloudflare Workers is yet another context. Okay, it's not JavaScript that runs in the browser, and it's not Node.js either. What Cloudflare does is have these little workers, and workers is based on a JavaScript standard that is different from what Node works. So the Cloudflare team are working on workers and they're improving it so that you will eventually have access to FS and things like that. But at least for now, it's a lot more event driven and a lot more low level. So I've tried to indicate that by here. Like you've got one big server here, which is where Node.js is running. But with Cloudflare, you only have little processes, so they're much smaller environments than you would get in Node, and so therefore it doesn't have access to a file system to write to, and certain things like that. So because of a lot of these packages that you'll use are dependent on things like file system and other things that I haven't mentioned here. You can't use them in workers. And that kind of makes sense because workers are a lot more smaller, they're a lot less, they're a lot cheaper, but they can be a little bit trickier to work with. Like we refactored that function so that it didn't use any of the libraries, but it just used the native stuff that you've got access to in JavaScript already. Okay, so that's what it's already running on the server. This is not running in the browser, but it's a different kind of server, if you know what I mean. It's just you only have access to a very, very small part of the server, let's say, whereas with Node, you've got access to a lot more. Okay, hope that makes sense, and I hope that helps you to understand runtime environments and what they are. I've got some more info here. This is a docs about runtime APIs and how that affects workers, if you want to have a look at that. All right, thanks. Hope that was helpful.